Hey there, folks. Welcome to another episode of Rise Like Lions. I am Kevin.
And I'm Dave.
And good to be back with you. And sorry, we've been offline a little bit. And man, I gotta own that. Life got a little bit busy. Things were going down. I think I've mentioned before that I'm a professor at an Ontario college, and anyone who's been watching the news, I guess, in Ontario probably knows that we're in contract negotiations, and they're not going too well, Dave.
No.
Not surprisingly. Yeah, our employer is a piece of work, folks, is all I will say. And so anyway, that's been sort of taking up time, and end of term, getting marks in, all that stuff, marking essays. So my bad, but we're happy to be back, and we're excited too, folks, because this is a good news episode, and we don't get to do that often, Being a lefty podcast, Dave, you don't get a lot of good news.
No, come on, it's all rainbows. Sunshine usually.
Yeah, unicorns, puppy dogs, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But no, we've got a really good one. And I think we're going to start out with a video that Dave found about what just happened, which is an electoral victory in Chile. And so let's go to the video here and let's watch what is going on in Chile. And then we're going to comment a little bit on putting this in a broader context, because it isn't just one good election in one country.
No.
This is a whole trend that's been happening.
String of them.
Yeah, a string of them right in Latin America. So let's check this out, folks, without further ado.
Well, the most important thing that this election shows is that the legacy of Pinochet, the legacy of the U.S. installed far-right dictatorship that came into power after a CIA-backed coup in 1973 that overthrew the elected socialist president of Chile, then Salvador Allende. That legacy that Pinochet left is dead. The Chilean people just buried the legacy of Pinochet, and with this massive victory, Gabriel Boric, with 55% of the vote, now has a mandate to rewrite the constitution. This is the most important thing that will come out of this election in Chile. Of course, 2 years ago, there was a big uprising, protests against the neoliberal austerity policies of the current billionaire president, Piñera. And as a result of those protests, there was a democratic referendum in which the people of Chile voted to rewrite the constitution through a referendum. And through a convention process, rather. And now Boric has the constitutional mandate to continue moving forward to rewrite the Pinochet-era constitution. At the same time, though, we should recognize that Boric, as you mentioned, he's not a very left-wing candidate. He's certainly not a revolutionary. He spent a lot of his campaign attacking Venezuela, attacking Nicaragua, attacking Cuba. So there are goods and bads about this. But the most important thing is that Jose Antonio Cast, he represented the legacy of Pinochet. He openly defended the right-wing dictatorship. He openly attacked democracy. And the fact that Cast lost in this overwhelming landslide victory is a sign that the Chilean people does not want to return to the years of the Pinochet dictatorship.
You know, in a fresh tweet, you wrote, and I quote, "The pink tide is coming back in Latin American narrative is too simplistic. As someone who is cautious to be carried away by enthusiasm, I want you to abund on this affirmation, based, of course, in what Boris had said about his foreign policies on Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba in one hand, and the U.S. in the other."
Well, there are two contradictions that we should talk about in Latin America. One is the far-right corrupt authoritarians like we see in Brazil with Bolsonaro, like we see in Colombia with Ivan Duque, like we see in Chile right now with Piñera. It's important to defeat these far-right figures. At the same time, though, there's also the contradiction of U.S. imperialism. So Boric is certainly better than Cast. Boric is going to be an improvement on Cast because Cast was, again, he's the son of a Nazi, literally. His father was a member of the Nazi party under Hitler, and he wanted to bring back the Pinochet dictatorship policies. So that is important. But at the same time, when it comes to the other contradiction of imperialism, Boric is very weak. And the reality is that more and more in Latin America, we see that there are two different kinds of lefts that are in power. There is the revolutionary anti-imperialist left we see in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Bolivia, which are part of the ALBA, the Bolivarian Alliance. They're trying to fight to unify Latin America and the Caribbean, to resist US colonialism, and to be free and independent and sovereign. And then there's another left that is more moderate and that is not anti-imperialist, and it can do some good things. We've seen, for instance, that Alberto Fernandez in Argentina, and AMLO in Mexico, and now Boric, they will be able to accomplish some important things of resisting neoliberal policies and creating new progressive policies domestically. But the problem is that they sometimes do that at the expense of the leftist governments in the region. So I think the challenge now for Boric, he's going to have to choose. Is Boric going to ally with Washington against the other countries in Latin America? Or is Boric going to work with his allies, work with his neighbors in the other parts of Latin America and the Caribbean, and unify the region against US imperialism? I think that is the most important question going forward for Chile.
All right, maybe let's we'll give that a pause there.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting stuff, Dave.
It is. Finally.
It
Thank
really is.
God. Pinochet, that is just one of the worst terrorists of all time. And, you know, they've cleaned up what they've said about them, but that it's emblematic of all of the screwing around that Americans and British too, and of course us, have done in places, taken away their autonomy, supporting the worst brutal people. You know, you say what you want for most things that are leftists, even when they've lost their way and stuff, but it's just not that level of where everybody's worse off. Everything's harder, you know, and where they've so changed the Constitution so that really they have had Pinochet up till now, in effect.
Yeah.
Like the ghost of Pinochet stays in everything all this time. And he was simply a terrorist.
Yeah. And this was, the coup, obviously in Chile, that was launched against Salvador Allende, who was a democratically elected socialist, who came into power in Chile. And I believe it was 1973 he was overthrown. And it was September 11th, right?
Yes.
So,
the real first September 11th.
Yeah, Chileans will say exactly. They'll say we had our own September 11th, and it was arguably more horrific when you.
And I mean, that was a clear-cut win with proper democratic processes and everything. All the excuses you want, but there's no doubt. You know. Yeah,
and it was a really, so and that's what, so what happened, recently in Chile is, obviously, like the video is saying, I mean, this Gabriel Boric, she's only 35 years old, former student activist, and what Dave and I were just talking about before, we started the podcast was what's exciting about what just happened in Chile too is so they have this electoral victory. And like the video was saying, and like we're talking about, it's a resounding rejection of the last of the legacy of Pinochet, this sort of authoritarian right-wing, right-wing populism, which for so long was entrenched in Latin America, right? Yeah. But what we've seen, and this is why we wanted to do a video with what happened in Chile, it would be enough just with this incredible electoral victory.
Yes.
But this is really a trend. This is something that's been unfolding across Latin America for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's been ebbing and flowing. It seems to get beaten back at times, folks, but then it comes back again. And it's incredibly exciting to see, and so some of the other things that have been happening. Well, actually, sorry, before I get to some of the other countries, I guess the point that we were talking about before was that, this is an electoral victory that just happened, but it was a buildup of years of student activism, hardcore activism in the streets.
Right. Yeah, I was just saying one of the first things I saw that really caught my attention was when the students were going to the turnstiles at train stations, bus stations, things like that. Yeah. And the people just can't afford that. It's supposed to be freely available to them. So the kids, the high school kids, young college kids took it on themselves and just said, no, you're going through. Then they're getting harassed for a few of them opening them up. And by the next day, you're looking at where you've got just thousands of the kids just going, good luck catching all of us because we're going to keep opening these things. And that's been the beginning that ever since has been just step by step by step.
Definitely.
Because why would the people have ever wanted this? All it's been is a piggy bank for big greedy corporation stuff. which, fine if it's on a fair level field, but it's just not.
Yeah, definitely. And in all these cases where you had, for instance, you had, your Pinochets, you had, horrible governments in Colombia and Mexico, all these right-wing governments.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's always corporations backing them, but also always the United States
Always.
lurking behind the.
Sorry, I don't necessarily make that distinction anymore between
Yeah.
it's a corporation or it's the United States. 601. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's important
don't know
for
which
our
is
viewers who
yeah.
maybe don't steep themselves, I should say, in as much
oh, good for you. Must
horrible
be,
history
must
as we
be
do.
relaxing.
Yeah, but that's what was going on. Basically, the United States viewed Latin America as its own private playground, as its sort of secondary economy that it could exploit
As it
will.
was for before when they freed from the original colonialisms there.
Yeah.
It was that.
Yeah, exactly. The
Yeah.
U.S. just picked up the former colonial relationships that had existed with Spain and whatnot, and just sort of recast them in a slightly less barbaric way.
Basically, just to say that was the right position for you. It's fine. You can have a little different of a governmental format, but you're still supposed to produce for us. If we're in the north and elsewhere, well, that's the real people. You're supposed to serve it. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they have no lives of their own.
No, you weren't allowed to run your country for your people. That's for sure. But what so to sort of put this in context, there's a great article that just came out on Counterpunch just over the weekend, and it says the pink tide rumbles in south of the border. And so what they're talking about here is just that there's a series of electoral victories. So this article is actually referencing the most recent one was in Honduras when this article was written. This is before the Chilean
Right.
breakthrough. And in Honduras, what's really incredible is if, so in 2000, I believe it's 2012, or 2011, 2012, the government of Manuel Zelaya was overthrown in Honduras. And overthrown, it was Clinton in the State Department at the time, right, who sort of led this charge to overthrow the government. Again, democratically elected.
Oh, wait, but isn't Clinton very different from conservative
Totally.
Republicans? Yeah. Radically
such
different.
a choice there, Dave, between Trump and Clinton, wasn't there? So yeah, it's really kind of pathetic. But of course, to the people of Honduras, this was a nightmare. And what's incredible is who just won the election in Honduras is the wife of Manuel Zelaya.
I know.
Yeah. So how interesting is that?
I am loving the synchronicity amongst these things. It's like that. They usually got extra screw yous against them, like the family of the former governor that was put there by Spain or whatever, taking on, et cetera, right? Now we seem to be seeing the exact same process the other way around. And
Yeah, it happened in Argentina
enjoyable.
a few years earlier.
Bolivia, I love that they do
Kirchner.
all that and oust them out because he's a little progressive, a bit left, and a bit indigenous. Now they've got hardcore indigenous far lefts in. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's another example, right? So recently too, you had the coup in Bolivia against the government of Evo Morales, and then it lasted 1 year, flamed out.
1 year.
And then the people retook it. They, like you said, another sort of radical, leader in there. So all across Latin America, this has been happening, and it's really, really exciting.
Beautiful.
And also they're, it's been going on for quite some time. So we were also talking about just before we started recording here about, Cuba obviously has been a bastion and an outlier for a lot of years, right? The revolutionary government there, for all its issues, and it has issues, we get it, but it still was
The government.
Yeah, there's a reason why we've got Mr. Guevara on the wall behind us there. That was a very powerful statement at the time against imperialism, to show that a tiny island like Cuba could chart its own course and
A man
survive.
inspired by the Irish rebels who had the same process done to them.
For sure, yeah.
UK.
Exactly. That's a great point. This whole current of self-determination, of actually governing for the people, of fighting back against imperialism, is really a global thing, which is not surprising why then Che, after the Cuban Revolution, went off, to the Congo and to Bolivia, where sadly he met his end. But because the idea was that this is a global movement, right, for people's government, for sovereignty, for freedom from imperialism and foreign domination, right?
For the beginning, for the first step. My God, can we get to the first step?
Yeah, exactly, right?
Because nothing's going to be sunshine and roses after that either, but it's the first step towards being able to do something. Forever there are problems, but you just can't keep manufacturing them. You can't accept your enemy as though they're like, oh, just some legitimate other, no. No more. We've got to get past it.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
been coming for 1,000 years.
You first have to be able to pass laws and not have your government overthrown if the laws don't benefit corporations, right? So another interesting thing in terms of what's happened recently is, so there was also elections in Venezuela. Yeah. And Venezuela, we know in the recent past, was targeted again by an attempted coup by the United States, right? And this time this clown Juan Guaido, who literally they just picked out of a lineup.
He's not the real president? I mean,
yeah, Canada thought
10% of the people there had kind of heard of him.
Yeah, and our government, to our endless shame, the lickspittle toadies that we tend to be, we backed up the Juan Guaido government, but it was a joke elsewhere, right? It was a joke within Venezuela.
Well, there was no Juan Guaido government. That's the biggest joke of all. They didn't even attempt to be governing anything.
For a day or
not
two,
even elected
in their own minds. Yeah. So anyway, there was another attempted coup in Venezuela. And if we go back even a little bit further, when Hugo Chavez won, again through a democratic election, and Chavez won over and over again by huge majorities. Huge minorities. Yeah. So the U.S. tried to overthrow him back in, I believe it was 2002, and they pretty much had done it, and then that coup was reversed, and it's the first time I had ever seen that happen, and it was unbelievable to see the people of Venezuela rise up and basically be like, "Nope, we're going to uncoup. Yeah. We're going to take Chavez back," right? So what's really interesting, Dave, is this is it's a battle, right? It's and it ebbs and it flows. The forces aligned against the victories of your Boric's, your Zelayas, your Kirchners, whatever sort of thing, your AMLOs, like all of these leaders that are coming into power in Latin America. The forces allied against them are intense, right? The forces trying to destroy Cuba ever since the revolution, right? And of course, we're talking about big business interests that feel disenfranchised, right? When they get their goodies taken from them.
Yes, you got a hangnail and you don't get an undue advantage over others. Then you're repressed. You're downtrodden.
It's horrible oppression, right? And so, very, very hopeful stuff that the people keep coming back in Latin America. And what they also keep demonstrating over and over again, and this is a lesson, I think, for us folks in North America that want to see this kind of change too, is that when you're able to combine grassroots movements, protests, resistance in the streets, but you're able to build broad-based coalitions, you can translate that into actual electoral change. You can actually get people elected that will affect your program, that will help you transform your country. And that's exactly what happened in Chile. A couple years of dedicated student protests, which broadened and became labor struggles and whatnot. And then you have, this 35-year-old former student activist who is now the president of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was willing to have coalitions. I mean, we're already hearing, as was pointed out there, but that excellent report, they're already hearing from the right wing. Let's face it, they're not right wing. They're radical, extremist right. They shouldn't even be on the board, on the chart. Yeah. But they're already calling communist because he had them in association. Well, by that is Donald Trump and all them Nazis? Is like, no.
Yeah.
I mean, well, probably not. At least not publicly.
Friendly with real Nazis, definitely.
But the thing is you're willing to make coalitions with anyone who has some form of interest, or willing to say, let's get this done, and then we can sort out whatever we need to. And it certainly won't be communist. That always happens when you don't get it together and do the other things necessary. That's actually when you're open to it receding to either of the fringes or whatever. whatever. So
Yeah, for sure. When you don't allow just the people's democratic will to be realized, which is all that's happening in Latin America. And you know, the other thing too, folks, is that, you know, so we've had these huge victories recently, like, you know, reversal of the coup in Bolivia, what's just happened in Chile, what happened in Honduras. Again, another important thing to point out is that Cuba, right, with the death of you know, with all the Castros sort of out of the picture, there was this idea that, oh, Cuba is going to become this total, you know, the government's going to collapse. You know, the capitalists are going to come in and they're going to
because of the story, it's communist, it's a dictatorship, it's this and that. But
and
they're stories, folks.
And it's unpopular.
Just stories.
Exactly. And that's not what's happened either. So what's really interesting is that the supposed protests that were going to overthrow the Cuban government have totally fizzled out.
Well,
So
they didn't get paid
happening.
for one thing. So
yeah,
they should pay them.
Maybe that's part of it. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is that one of the biggest reversals that happened recently was in Brazil, where you had the government of Dilma Rousseff. Yeah, who was that was overthrown. So again, just a little bit of history here. In Brazil, you had this incredible victory by this man, Lula da Silva, and the Workers' Party. A national electoral victory, and they really set about trying to transform Brazil, which had a lot of issues, you know, some of the highest inequality in the world, and yet it's also one of the biggest, most powerful countries in the world, right? It is one of the members of the BRICS, right, which are these kind of second tier global powers, and what Lula was able to do was to start shifting the Brazilian economy and political structure to include your working class and poor people and farmers. And they were doing really amazing work. And Lula handed it off after, I believe it was 10 years in power, to his really lifelong friend Dilma Rousseff, who continued on with the same sort of program and was really the victim of a soft coup. And I think it was like 2016, 2017 when that went down, but she was basically taken out of power in this bogus corruption scandal.
Right. By the most corrupt people the earth has ever seen. Boot. Yeah.
Definitely.
Who would have, if they didn't pull that off, been in prison?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Moro, right. This judge he was a lawyer, I guess a prosecutor, cooked up this whole, corruption charge against Rousseff. There was rampant corruption in the Brazilian government. This is the thing.
No question.
But one of the few non-corrupt people was actually Rousseff. So what they were able to get her on was this really lame technicality of, like, she moved funds from one sector of the economy to the other. She never appropriated any for herself.
No.
Like, she never took anything.
Yeah.
But they got her on this sort of bogus technicality. And at the same time, they put a hit on Lula as well. And they concocted this thing that he somehow got this apartment, you know, gifted to him. It was this really...
Through his wife and all that stuff, which, by the way, even they can't even sustain it now. So it's gone away.
It was thrown out, exactly. Like,
yet,
his charges were
he's
thrown out.
imprisoned. He's silenced.
Yeah.
It was the longest time before an interview could even be done with him, which was not normal there, even if you're a rapist, even if your crimes have to do with frauds that involve you voicing things or writing things. They don't restrict like that there. This was abnormal. This was very obviously a political move.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
Like you said, it was to silence him. It was to take him out of the election, and it did take him out of the previous election. And that's where Jair Bolsanaro was able to win, this far right lunatic, right? Like, who's literally makes Trump. No, he doesn't. No one makes Trump seem reasonable, but he gave Trump a run for his money.
Yeah.
In terms of right wing lunatics, right? And so what's incredible,
I think he's past them.
Yeah, he might have. But so Lula, not only does he get released from prison, but all the charges are dropped. And he now, as recent reporting shows, is far and away the leader for the upcoming elections next year in Brazil. So it looks like Lula's going to take Bolsonaro out and reestablish the movement there.
And hopefully the lessons learned once and for all, like they're going to have to empower quicker, because Lula, yes, he's very progressive and everything. But one comment that has often been made by analysts and things who are on more of the progressive left side is that he actually is pretty tame. He wasn't going too far. He wasn't taking it away. But, you know, Canadian mineral companies, for instance, and stuff were just like, oh, hell no, you don't do any of it at all.
Yeah.
And besides, you're starting to recede back the poverty housing and all that rest. So they're not desperate to have to work for us and won't take, you know, pennies on the dollar for pay and stuff. This isn't good.
Yeah.
You know, we're not able to just go into that Amazon and strip her down. Like, we should be free to do that. We could sort it out later. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, like Lula wasn't a radical, right? Like that,
No.
that's the point you're making, and it's a good
He
point.
receded poverty a lot.
Yeah.
But by doing it in a very measured way where he said, no, I don't hate on you, international business and whatever, especially Canadian mining concerns.
Yeah.
But I do need to accomplish this. So we're going to tame things back with you a little bit so you just can't run completely wild and free.
Yeah.
So we can apply that to the people a bit. And actually that could have done like happened in the New Deal in the US. That saved capitalism. Hell, we wouldn't even be doing this right now if they hadn't have done that, because the whole world would have inevitably, including here, already naturally gone towards a left way, you know?
Yeah.
Or they would have had to really, like, literally come down harder than ever, you know, and, you know, bring back monarchies or something.
Yeah, Lula's a social democrat, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the
Moderate.
thing is, it's an incredible thing that these people are able to get elected in Latin America again, you know, against incredible amounts of hardship and difficulty and challenge. And I think
all
really
the odds.
at the end of the day, that's the kind of big takeaway here, folks. And
Yeah.
it is a positive one. This is the good news aspect of what just happened in Chile with this victory, what's just happened in Cuba with these supposed anti-government protests flaming out, which happened recently in Bolivia. Like, all of these countries are showing, and especially showing to folks in North America, like us, like here in Canada and the United States, where things politically are really, really challenging, where we have not seemed to be able to solve that puzzle of how you get your movements on the ground, how you build your broad-based coalitions and translate that into electoral success. We need to be taking more lessons from Latin America. The South needs to teach the North in this case. And I think we are ready to learn that lesson. I think I'm ready, Dave.
I think not. It doesn't even matter really if us old farts are ready, because I look down and try not to look down my nose at what's coming along under us, and it doesn't even matter with class or anything. They're ready.
Yeah.
They're ready. They're going to do that. And even with challenges of, they tried to dumb them down, they tried to restrict them from things, give them too many shiny things to distract them. It doesn't seem to matter, because they've turned off the programming. They're not programmed anymore.
Yeah.
And it's going to be frustrating now to be able to continue.
Yeah.
So if some of us can lead the way and be open to them, even when maybe they're out there a little bit, or they don't quite get it, be open to it. We need those broad coalitions, because that's what keeps winning with all of these things.
Yeah, definitely.
When finally, everybody says, those of us who are for the people, no matter where we stand, we got to first get this done.
Yeah.
Just like conservatives said, no matter what, crazies, political, business, anything, we got to come together. Well, and they accomplish it. Time to follow that, let's do it.
Yep, for sure. That's the lesson. So anyway, folks, hopeful news. Let's learn it here in Canada. Let's try and build that broad-based coalition.
Yes.
Let's get governments elected that actually do
And
things.
be internationalists, because we can learn from them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And also let's support these movements and these successes in other countries. Let's pressure our government to not do what our government tends to do, which is line up behind the United States and their attempts to sort of overthrow and destabilize these other countries, right? So very hopeful news. We'll leave it at that, and take care, folks. Thanks very much for watching. And if you like what you saw, please feel free to subscribe, to like, to even share the video if you're feeling really frisky. We'd appreciate it. Thanks very much, folks. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.